Hi, I'm Laura Hahn Segundo Collins,
And I'm Joy Han Silva Malora.
and welcome to Hahnacity. Hey,
Good
Joy.
afternoon.
Good afternoon. What's going
Wardrobe
on?
change. Just kidding.
Not kidding.
We are doing back-to-back interviews.
That's right.
So,
That's right. Because it's an astrological event for our schedules to come together.
I
So,
know.
we end up doing a lot of interviews. And it's cool because then we're just filled with really great interviews and conversations on one day.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
speaking of,
And today's no different.
yep. Before we get to that, though,
Okay.
how are you doing?
How am I doing? How am I doing? Yes, let's do a check-in, right?
Yeah, let's do a check-in with each other.
Good. Things are moving along. That didn't seem believable, did it?
Believable. That's
No,
okay.
it's good.
Sometimes it could be like, it's just an ordinary Tuesday.
Yeah, and
Nothing
I
wrong with
think
that.
life is a lot of both and. There's both the things that can be challenging and tough, and then there's the things that are like, I'm so grateful for. The world is on fire, and then there's also so much to love and appreciate. And I think that's just always hand in hand all the time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I'm feeling right now. I'm always happy to see you, though. That is like a highlight of my life, every moment that I get a chance to hang out with you. And I'm so excited because you're going to be here in
I
just a couple
know.
more weeks.
It's really exciting. I get to be with you for my birthday, which is always the best thing to do. On my birthday is to be with you. My husband asked me what I wanted to do for my birthday, and I said I wanted to spend it with you. So
You make me cry. You make me cry.
I mean, I want to spend it with him too, but really,
Of course. Of course.
It's most important to be
Marvin
able to
first.
see you.
Just happens to be Marvin in New York.
Yeah, he's like, "What do you want to do for your birthday?" I want to see Laura. Okay.
He's so awesome. You have such an amazing hubby.
You have an amazing hubby too.
I do.
And our hubbies love each other, so that's always the best thing.
Yeah. I wish you all could see a sticker that was made of Marvin and Nathan walking down Lafayette Avenue, hand in hand, arm in arm with an umbrella.
Under one umbrella.
Yep. Under one umbrella. Exactly. Like Mary Poppins or something. It's really adorable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just remember when Nathan first met Marvin, he actually met Marvin on his own because we had a dinner to go to for our other cousin. And I had to share Marvin's contact with Nathan and didn't realize I had a bunch of emojis after Marvin's name. And your husband's response was gross. And I looked and I'm like, what? And I realized that my shared contact had a bunch of love emojis. And so,
Aww. Sweet.
it was
It's very sweet.
Yeah, it is what it is. So
I
happy
think
Tuesday.
Marvin is one of his favorite people of all time, for sure.
Me too.
He has made that very clear.
Yeah, I think we're both lucky. We have good partners. So
yeah. So I can't wait to see you.
I know, me too.
Very soon.
With that,
let's talk about Shai Goodman, who's our fantastic guest today on Hahnacity. Maybe I'll read Shai's bio.
Okay.
Shai Goodman is committed to making sport a space where everyone can thrive. A former four-year NCAA athlete and team captain, Shai has continued her competitive journey in endurance sports. She holds a master's degree in cultural studies of sport and education from UC Berkeley, where her research focused on LGBTQIA athletes in nature sports. Her work has been published in the Journal of Education and Culture Studies, and she has presented at the Center for Social Cultural Sport and Olympic Research Annual Conference. Shai is a certified personal trainer through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. She's also a founding board member of Benny's Club, a queer surf nonprofit dedicated to reducing barriers to entry into surf culture. Most days, she's moving, thinking about movement, or recovering from moving a little too much. Without further ado, Shai Goodman.
Yay!
Hi, Shai. Welcome to Hahnacity. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I've never been on this side of the podcast mic before, so it's going to be new. Bear with me if it's awkward.
Oh my gosh,
really?
This is amazing.
Do you mind telling everybody about your podcast, by the way? We should just right off the bat talk about it because I got to say, Shai is an amazing, amazing interviewer.
Well, thank you. You were a great guest. That episode will be coming out in a few months. So, yeah, check out Physically Educated. That is my podcast. And my friend Charlotte Traver helps a lot with the editing. Physically Educated is all about, kind of giving voice to athletes who are doing things differently, kind of like making cultural change in their sport. I think it's just folks that really inspire me, and I just want to, selfishly talk to a little bit more. And it kind of just went from there. I released season 1. Now I'm like halfway through season 2, and comes out twice a month. So yeah, check it out. Thank you.
So awesome. And she does it on her own. Absolutely incredible.
And it's incredible you have an editor, because that's a
it
lot
makes a
to
difference.
do all.
Yeah.
We feel you on that. That's a lot to prepare for.
Well, Shai, that's where we're at today. And maybe this is a loaded question, but would love to hear your story of where you came from to get to that place where now, you've got this Physically Educated podcast. You are a consultant. You work with athletes. You do amazing things out in the world. Walk us through your journey from back then to where you're at now. Loaded question, I know.
Yeah, I mean, where to start? I'm originally from New York City. I think, when I reflect back on my life, I just really think about like sport just kind of being the through line through everything. Like I had a brother who was 5 years older than me. Shout out Jake, love him. But yeah, I mean, he was a big athlete, and both my parents are pretty competitive athletes. So I think it was just felt like moving kind of just felt like breathing to me from a really young age. I was always doing something. And if you asked me at, 5, I would have said I wanted to be the first woman in the MLB. And if you asked me at 8, I would have said I wanted to be a pro snowboarder. And if you asked me at, 13, I would have said I wanted to be a pro soccer player. It was always like, it was just sport. And I think sometimes I think about, if I had just like hyper specialized in one sport as a kid, maybe I would have gone on to like really achieve some of those like professional dreams that I had at a young age. But yeah, it was always just like moving as much as I can. It was like soccer, basketball, lacrosse, always baseball. I was a competitive snowboarder, surfing. Like it was just everything. And sport really just like gave me, I'm laughing at myself because my email and like my AIM handle was like Shai Sports at Gmail or whatever, which is just like so on the nose. But yeah, I mean, sport was just like always my identity. And it's interesting, like it's definitely waned in how my relationship to it, in the sense of like, I think I really resented it for periods and in high school, like feeling really embarrassed for like wanting to be so competitive and for taking myself really seriously. I think it was like where I grew up, it was kind of like weird for girls to be like taking themselves so seriously as an athlete. And so I think I had a period where I was like, yeah, just so embarrassed and wish I was just like, could be a normal girl and like not care about sports and not take myself so seriously. But, I was able to move through that and ended up getting recruited to play lacrosse in college, and had just like a really special 4 years as a college athlete. Ended up being able to like captain my team and lead us to a winning season and doing all these things that I just like really dreamed about when I was a kid. And then, yeah, I graduated college, and the super competitive, kind of traditional sport environment really changed for me. And then, over the last 6 or 7 years, it's been kind of a reckoning of like how I'm supposed to navigate sport now as this like kind of post-collegiate athlete. But yeah, I mean, I think, there's a lot in there too that like I can go deeper on. I think sport for me in a lot of ways was so positive, and like I really have a love connection with sport. And also there are things about sport, my teams, my relationship with my gender and sexuality, like all those things were also really like complicated within a sporting landscape. And I think over time, as I've just like reflected on my own relationship with sport, and also like done more research in graduate school, and been in kind of like these non-traditional sporting spaces where I find myself in now that are super different from the ones that I grew up with, has just caused me to like reflect a lot on those and kind of examine the maybe not so great parts of sport. Sorry, that was like a big spiel, but happy to share more in anything in there.
Oh, that's what we asked for. Thank you so much for the overview. Yeah, there's so many questions I have. The first one that I have is, clearly you're an athlete. Clearly you are athletic. You are drawn to it. You're coming from a family who are a bunch of athletes. It is in your blood. It's clearly in your molecules. It's in your spirit. And then you say that there is a time where you're like, not proud of it. It's my word's not yours, but it almost feels like a shame, but you're kind of like pushing it aside. What was the messaging at the time that you think was impacting that or influencing those thoughts that you were having at that time? And how old were you?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. So I went to this like public elementary school, and like being a tomboy or being an athlete was like really celebrated. It was cool. Like I never thought twice about it. Like I was very like wearing all my brother's clothing with the boys and every recess or whatever, just like always going super hard. Yeah, like loving sport and being like super validated for being an athlete. And I remember at that time, so like this is kind of silly, but there was like the downtown Little League baseball league, which is what I was in. And I was very much like, I'm a baseball player. I was really good at baseball. I was like our starting second baseman, whatever, through like second, third, fourth, fifth grade. And then I started this private middle school for sixth grade. And so I got to the school, and I remember on the first day I was wearing like checkered Vans, like my brother's shorts and like a big t-shirt. And I walked in and I was like, oh, fuck, I'm doing something wrong here. Like, just super apparent that like the way I was presenting and my energy and attraction to sport and like being really competitive was just like kind of a no-go. It was just like, this is very out of the norm. Like, girls don't really dress like this. Girls don't really act like this. And yeah, like I think that started to just like trickle in very quickly. I was like, oh, I'm not wearing the uniform. Like I need to be wearing like the uniform that everybody else is. And then like, you know, I remember I was still competing in this baseball league throughout that time. I think it was like maybe through seventh grade. And I was the only girl left like in the majors, but I was still really good and I was like still really enjoying it. But I remember I had this like middle school boyfriend. We like went to the movies, and I had baseball practice first. And so I like showed up to our movie date in like my Marlins uniform, like full on baseball pants and everything. And in that moment, like I just got such a vibe. I was like, oh, he's not vibing with this. This clearly seems like I'm not supposed to do this anymore. And it was kind of in that moment where I was like, okay, I need to stop playing baseball. So, you know, and I didn't want to play softball because I was like, I don't know how to play softball. I'm not a softball player. I'm a baseball player. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of like the beginning of that process. And so I let baseball go, but I still like, you know, I was still super competitive and like trying really hard on my own. It just became a thing that was like private, and I really like wasn't getting that like external validation from my peers about that, like from middle school and high school. I had a few coaches who were validating in the sense of like, yeah, you should like keep trying on your own. Like you are gifted in these ways. You clearly are really hungry for it. But it was just like in high school, the boys were really encouraged to be like lifting all the time, getting after it, doing the off-season training, whatever. And I was doing those things, but I couldn't tell anybody about it because it was just like a weird look. And that sucked. And that was like, I just remember being like really like having a lot of shame and like self-hate where I was just like, why am I so into this? Like there's something wrong with me. You know, obviously there are pro women athletes who are doing this, but in this community and like this environment, that's like not okay. So it was just like, yeah, something that I felt like was constantly in like conversation with myself.
It's a whole lot.
You know, this is reminding me of an experience that I had. And so my heart is with you right now because I remember being at UCLA and we were coming back from some meet somewhere, and we must have just come straight from the pool because we had our UCLA was like the nice sweats. What am I talking about? The uniform, the
Tracksuit.
The tracksuit. Thank you very much. Hallelujah. Yeah. So we had our tracksuits on, and of course we're divers. So we're waiting for the flight to go, and this guy comes over and he goes, "Hey, you know, that's awesome UCLA. You guys are a weightlifting team?" And the training staff, they're really lovely, big-hearted people and wonderful, but I don't know if they knew exactly how to train divers. Like we kind of got trained in the same way that they would do football or anybody else. So we're kind of like muscly people. And granted, I was muscly anyway. I had like these ginormous cheeks. It looked like that's just how I looked. And then on top of it, I looked like I was 12 when I was like a freshman in college. But I still remember that. Like that stuck with me, and it made me feel like I didn't belong to any gender. I wasn't a woman. I wasn't a man. Just throughout my life, the body that I'm like in was always like is this a boy? This is a girl. Because I remember being a small child and also wore my Vans and we had these like knee-high socks with the, collared shirt and shorts. And people would think I was a boy because we all had the bowl cuts. We all had the bowl cuts. Thanks, Mom. That's Mom's fault. But anyway, I mean, to your point about like the messaging that we get as women athletes, but particularly you are in a sport that very few women are in, period. Being a baseball player, which you absolutely are forever and ever. And I love that we're seeing baseball starting to flourish in the spaces of women athletes today. But as you're thinking about that fact that baseball and women today, we are seeing Ilona Maher and just the talk about the body of the woman athlete today versus the messaging that you got back then. What are your thoughts? How are you feeling about how it's transitioned over time in this way? And then to think back to where you came from and the fact that you had to leave your sport because of the messaging you got.
I think there's been a lot of progress, and we have these like women athlete role models who are really like speaking out and like saying like there is a diverse variety of bodies that can be elite and Olympic and all these things, which is amazing. And yet I think there is still this, I think especially in endurance sports, you see a lot of like a certain style of body that is still like uplifted and celebrated. And that's complicated to navigate because you have to know how to fuel your body and take care of your body and do all these things. On the one hand, like I think we're making progress, but I also think, I don't know if that little girl, if what happened, I guess that was, almost 20 years ago, how different that would be today. You know what I mean? I still think that there is like a lot of societal pressure for young women athletes to look a certain way, to, if the whole like concept of the female apologetic, like having to wear your lipstick and look hot when you go on the track and, like do all these things to make it okay that you're taking yourself seriously as an athlete. Like I think in some ways we're making progress there, and no shade to people who, if you want to dress up and feel really feminine, like, and that is the way that you genuinely want to present, like, hell yeah, all kudos to you. But I think for a lot of athletes, like that's not what I wanted. I wanted to just be able to wear what I want and feel like celebrated and okay for that. And that really wasn't okay. And I think ultimately it led, in my experience, like I definitely overcompensated in all these other ways looking back to be hyper feminine or to think that I needed to do all these things because I was being an athlete. I was being a competitive athlete. I was taking myself seriously, and I knew all those things weren't cool. So I needed to like double down on dating boys, and especially in high school, like there is a lot of behaviors that I look back on where I was like, what was that really about? And like, I mean, I think there's, for me, a lot wrapped up in the like internalized homophobia that I had in, women's sports, just like the trope of becoming like another lesbian athlete. Like that was a really negative thing that I heard a lot. And like, now I'm a queer athlete and that's okay. But at the time, that was like my worst fucking nightmare. So, it's like, it's just, yeah, it's interesting to see like when I look back on photos and stuff, even from like college where I'm like trying to kind of do the most, where I'm like, you know what, there's been a lot of growth since then.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I also think like both of your stories with unconscious biases that come with it, I think that's a whole nother conversation to have of like baseball obviously being a sport where you generally think about males, and then you're in a position where you're in a sport where you are like both genders are represented, and it's one of those things like there's so much comparison, I'm sure, where you are at and a different type of pressure when you are competing with boys and hyper vigilant like focus on you because I'm sure you're one out of a few, and so how is that of an experience when you were on the field versus when you were outside of the field being compared to the athlete versus males on your team? And you talked about a little bit outside of sport and how you had to put on your hat of being extra feminine and doing all the things that were opposite of what you felt was authentic to yourself. I'm curious on like on the field, how did that affect you too?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I really haven't thought about that like little league period in a long time, but it was like very fundamental to a lot of like other sporting experiences that I had. And I think it was interesting. Like in the beginning, I had a lot of confidence because it was more co-ed. And so in the beginning, in, like second, third grade, there was like more girls and, we were all really equal. And, there was like women coaches and male coaches and whatever. And then it was funny. And it must have been I must have been like 11 or 12, maybe 13 at this point, where I was like the last girl left. And I remember that's when it started to feel really awkward because I was getting a lot of looks. I was like this little blonde girl, like, and one of the coaches was like, first of all, he was like, you need to wear a cup. And I was like, well, I don't need to wear a cup. I don't have a reason to wear a cup. And he was like, well, all the boys are wearing a cup, so you got to wear a cup. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to do that. But I was like, okay, that's interesting that like already there are things where it's like you're kind of being pushed out. And then I had this experience where I just started getting like chirped at like crazy from either the other team, or the most apparent incident was another male coach where my dad was actually at this game and he talks about it all the time. I was up at bat. I wasn't the best hitter, but I had this coach being like, there's a girl here, like get the girl off the field, and I'm like, you're an adult man. Like, what do you imagine saying that to a child, first of all, but he was so in my ear the whole time, the whole game. And then I had like the biggest hit of my whole life just to kind of like give him the fuck you. But
Nice.
after that game, I definitely was like, oh, I really don't belong here. It's like I'm getting this feedback from, players giving me weird looks. I'm getting this feedback from other coaches who are adults. I'm getting this feedback from my community. All these kind of points were sounding this alarm of like, okay, it's time for you to get out of here. And like who knows how good of a baseball player I would have been. Like maybe I would have wanted to leave eventually and, go do something else. Like eventually it led me to, the lacrosse was the same season. So eventually I got there. So it was like, I don't feel any regrets about it. But I would have liked to have just had that transition on my own and been able to like make that decision and not have been pushed out at such a like, it's such a.
Yeah, how old were you at this time? I'm like so curious that there's this intensity and it sounds like middle school, high school at most.
Yeah, it was
Right?
middle school. It was like, I think
Holy
I was
moly.
probably 12. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Were
And
the
we're
stakes
not
that
surprised.
high? Like where it was
Right.
like, get this girl off the team and like, I mean,
Right. Not that
was
deep.
this
Totally
like
not
what
that deep.
game was this? Was this some random Saturday night? Like
Totally.
this is insane to me.
Yeah.
Like,
Really not that deep. And I mean, it was also like, it was like downtown Little League baseball. Like this was not a private club. This is like when I really think of like, and this was something Laura and I think have talked about before of just like, this was just an opportunity to play. There was no money on the line. This wasn't anything collegiate, semi-professional, nothing like that. These were like kids playing baseball. And for it to be like that, already that rigid and strict, and this was 20 years ago, like I definitely am bummed to like think back to that time for sure.
that's heartbreaking.
Can I ask you this something then? Can we reclaim this a little bit?
Let's do it.
What did you love about playing baseball for you? I would love to hear what was in it for you. What was Shai the baseball player like?
I think it's funny, I just like haven't thought about this time in so long, but I really did like handle the pressure. Like I loved where it was like, you're either up at bat and it's like you and there's all eyes on you, or, a ball's coming in and I'm on second and it's like, okay, I got to make the play. And it's like, if I don't make the play, I don't know. Like, I just think it was the first time where I was kind of like, because I played a lot of team sports and I love team sports, and baseball is obviously such a team sport, but there are these moments where it kind of does come down to the individual. And it was the first time that I could like build a fire and then be like, okay, now it's on me to execute. The feeling of, like crushing a single and getting there quickly or making a great play, like those experiences definitely validated the like athletic identity and gave me confidence to like take that and bring it into other places,
That's awesome.
Badass.
I have a question for you, Shai, on okay, so the transition to lacrosse. And so we talk about, like I just said, unconscious biases. Do you feel like lacrosse chose you, or did you choose lacrosse after baseball? With your experience, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It definitely felt like it chose me. I had never really heard of lacrosse or played lacrosse, or I mean, I never knew it was a thing. And then I started at this new middle school and they had a lacrosse program, and I'd never seen a lacrosse stick before, nothing like that. And I think it was in middle school, you kind of like try out a bunch of different sports. And I just like took to it really quickly. And I think because I had started it so much later and I didn't have baggage with it or history associated, I wasn't burned out. I just like fell in love with it so fast. And it felt like a really fun combination of, it's a really fast-paced sport. It's very physical, but also like I was an attacker. Like I love to score a goal and, like make a play. And it just, yeah, it all lined up kind of at the right time. And especially when I got to high school, like it was an opportunity to be teammates with older girls and play on varsity. And we got to travel to like Florida for a training camp. And it just like led to all these other opportunities that were so novel and exciting. And it's funny because it's a sport that I've put thousands and thousands and thousands of hours into, but I really don't play or have a relationship with anymore. And so it's like kind of funny to think about. But yeah, it's a really, really fun sport. And it's great to watch too.
Well, I'm also curious. I'm going to ask you another tough question with that, because you talk about like your identity being shifted when you started baseball and going into like your friendships and how you had to do those things. But like I think stereotypically, I think lacrosse is just because of the physicality of it and the type of athletes that choose lacrosse. Did it feel more like you could be yourself because it was very physical, or was it still like a war between the two, being on the field and then coming outside of that field? Did you get treated differently because you were a lacrosse player as opposed to a baseball player? Because I think like just those stereotypes that come to your brain with lacrosse, it comes with a whole slew of different expectations, right? So I'm just curious how that played into a role with you, or if it even did.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, like you're totally right. Like lacrosse is very physical, like in the actual like practice and game space. In my experience, yeah, like I felt like very validated and safe in that environment. But at least in my school, like lacrosse was a very like it was just more feminine. It was more like I don't want to say like popular, but there was something about it that was like maybe more accepted, where it was kind of like the hot girls were like playing lacrosse and they had boyfriends and they like, and so I think in that environment, honestly, it made me feel like a lot of pressure to like be like them and like, be feminine and be down with what they were doing. And I mean, I think there is a lot of internalized homophobia on like female sports teams. And so I think, at least in my experience in high school, everybody was kind of trying to like reject those ideas. And so like everybody was trying to say like, we're not gay athletes. Like we are girls who are straight, who like to play this sport. And like, I don't know, and maybe I'm misremembering, but that's definitely how it felt. And I remember like loving the team, making a lot of great friends on the team, feeling really proud to be on that team, especially in high school, but definitely being like, oh, this is a way more feminine space than other even like female teams I had been on before.
Gosh. When would you say it started coming together? Like finally aligning where you could just be yourself and comfortable in your skin?
It's even throughout college, like I had a wonderful college lacrosse program, and my teammates in that space I loved, and like what we accomplished together, like I feel really proud of. But at the same time, like that was still a space where I was like, I don't want to be a gay athlete. I don't want to disrupt the team dynamic. There were queer girls on the team, but it was very quiet, and it was very like, our team culture looks heteronormative, it looks feminine. We do mixers with the boys teams, we do XYZ thing. And that just, I didn't want to disrupt that culture. And I wish I could have been more brave, because, I was kind of like figuring out my sexuality my junior year of college, my senior year of college. And there was a ton of shame and self-hate throughout that process. And it was like pretty gnarly. But I knew when I was a senior, like on the lacrosse field and in my team dynamics, like I was one way. And then with like my friends outside of lacrosse, my housemates, I was like living kind of another life where I was very queer and like, dating women and doing all these things that I was completely private about and did not share with my teammates. But there were queer freshmen, and like I definitely could have been an example for them to be like, yeah, you can be queer, you can date whoever you want, and you can also be a great lacrosse player. Like, and I just didn't have the courage at the time to do that. Just because I felt like, yeah, lacrosse, I couldn't be the one to lead that change, and I couldn't be the person to change the culture. And it was really only after college, and I give a lot of credit to Benny's Club, which is a queer surf organization that's based in Rockaway Beach, that was started by two people, one person named Momo, one person named Joni, but I, alongside a few other people, helped kind of like found the organization. And they were the kind of first group of people that showed me what like a queer sporting space could look like. And it like totally broke my brain and like cracked me open in all these magical and amazing ways. But, up until that point, really, I was Shai, the athlete, who is straight and, feminine and XYZ. And then there was like Shai, the like queer person who was living like a very kind of different life. And those two things like really they couldn't like converge. They were just like, it was very bifurcated. And it's just, yeah, it's been really interesting over the last, like since I guess I graduated college, like how fundamentally that all has shifted.
Well, and so what's it like for you now?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I guess in 2020 or yeah, I guess 2019 or 2020, when Benny's Club still first kind of got going, and I was just around for the first time all these queer people who were like super out, super queer in their sexuality and their gender, and they were amazing surfers. And the environment on the beach was like so queer in the sense of just like it really countered what I understood about a traditional sporting environment, which is very competitive. You are going to tear this wave apart. And I mean, I've been surfing my whole life. And even from like the way that I surf has changed because of this group of people. So I don't know. It was flamboyant. It was like loud and warm and welcoming and just like very different to like any traditional sporting space I had ever been in. Like every other sporting space I had been in, it was just like hyper competitive and like the goal was kind of to win. And this is really like not the goal in these like sporting spaces. So yeah, I like got connected to all these amazing surfers. And then through them, I met, queer skaters and runners and cyclists and like a whole, and I think 2020, like a lot of things happened where it just led to like these affinity groups of queer people, of people of color, of trans folks getting together in the outdoors and gathering. Also, just like the power of social media really just like showed me, wow, there are people out here who are doing sport differently than I had ever seen it before, and like taking their own path and like engaging in sport in a way that is so counter to the way that I had done it for the 23 years before then. So yeah, it was that like kind of 2020 period really just like was the beginning. And then since then I've kind of, I guess it's like kind of my purpose and where I feel like most excited to be is like in these kind of alternative sporting spaces, learning from the folks who are either like achieving insane stuff athletically in those spaces or encouraging more people to get in. Because I think that was the other thing too, is like over time and like through my own research and my own experiences, like I'm very aware of the sports that I played and who has access to those sports. And often the people who have access are white, wealthy, cis, straight folks. And there are a lot of other people who could do really well through sports if they had the access or they had the knowledge or they had, somebody bringing them into those spaces. And often those spaces are gatekept for a reason. And so it really takes folks like doing work to bring more people in. And then once those people come in, those spaces just flourish. And I've really just seen firsthand, like in surfing, especially, like I've been in surf breaks where it's all white, cis, straight dudes, and it's aggro and it's competitive and it's not fun and it is not a nice place to be. And I have been in surf spaces where there are like every kind of surfer, every ability, every race, every gender, every sexuality, like, and the energy is just unmatched. Like it's buzzing. And I'm like, I want to be in sport spaces across sports like that. So that is like such a long spiel, and I don't even know what we're talking about anymore. But yeah.
I absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. I mean, we've talked about this before, is that the old regime, the old way of being, it's hard to dismantle it. It's been millennia of a certain kind of way of being in sports. And if we're trying to quote unquote dismantle it, like I always say, it's like scraping an iceberg with a tablespoon. What I love, what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing in places like Benny's and what you're doing and what Joy's doing, all of our spaces, is that we're creating a new iceberg. And it's like a loving space. It's a compassionate space. It's still got grit. It's still got like competition, but it's also fun. It's a space for everybody. And that's what I truly love in hearing what your story is. And you can just tell the difference between when you talk about what you had to do to keep yourself back, how much you held yourself back, and what an outstanding athlete you continue to be. So holy crap, had you been able to be so free as a young person, I mean, yeah, no matter what, at the very least, you would have had far less stress and a whole lot more fun.
Yeah.
And don't we want that for every athlete in the world, every coach in the world, every parent, every guardian, the experience of every fan to just enjoy and be able to enjoy competition at its fullest. I think that's what we're really challenging most of all. And I think what traditional and traditions have been, they're scared of it. They're scared that if we bring something different, it's somehow going to take away from the experience that has quote unquote always been there. But I actually think it enhances competition all around.
100%. 100%.
Athleticism all around.
For sure. I think a lot of the pushback that I feel like you see is like, if you lose the ways that you've done things, you're not going to achieve great things. You're not going to break records. You're not going to see amazing things. But like, I've been in queer surfing spaces and like, you know, surf events, Switch with Queer Surf and Benny's Club and even like whatever other spaces too, that like you see unbelievable shit when it's like you are, to your point exactly, like when you're free of the shackles of like what society is telling you you're supposed to do, look, or be as an athlete, like you can do so many unbelievable things. And it's not like somebody, I did a research project and somebody said something like, you know, queer folks, trans folks, folks of color, like they're not just surfing decent, like they're doing unbelievable things. And there are surfers that exist that like look really different than the surfers that you think exist. And they're like, you know, surfing in ways that would blow your mind. And I think, yeah, it's just like maybe we don't have that same media on them. And like we don't have a lot of, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but like, you know what I mean? There's just a lot more that we can do and push ourselves and grow. And yeah, we're not so like wound up by like society's pressure, you know. That was so not eloquent. Oh my God.
Oh no, but what I'm hearing is that we're missing stories. There's like great stories to be had, and there's great athleticism that is already being had. So there's just much more. There's much more happening right now. Shai, can you do us a favor? Because I'm not sure if everybody who's listening understands what it means when we say traditional versus non-traditional sports. You also mentioned like nature sports. Not everybody knows. People who are kind of run-of-the-mill, basketball, baseball. What does it mean when we say non-traditional sports or nature sports?
Yeah, this is kind of like my own personal understandings of this, so it might not be what everybody thinks or what academia thinks. I mean, how I understand it is like non-traditional sports, meaning potentially action sports, surfing, snowboarding, skating, BMX, you know, nature sports being running, cycling, you know, gravel riding, all the kind of like the endurance sports. Those are the sporting spaces that personally I'm just most interested in right now. I think the stories that come out of those spaces, the way that community is kind of at the forefront in those spaces, the kind of grassroots nature. I mean, there is a corporatization of all of those sports as well, 100%. But I think those sports to me feel, yeah, like maybe closer tied to nature. And like I think there's a lot of research that's being done about the ocean and how people like the conquering of nature and all of these things that kind of like bring kind of like nature, especially in the kind of like the gravel running, those surfing sports. That kind of is like a big thing that is discussed there.
Cool. Now, you've gone through all of this. You've been on quite a journey. You have now come full circle in some ways. Maybe that's my word, not yours, but it feels like it because now you are literally taking care of athletes and supporting them where they're at. Can you tell us a little bit more about your practice and your work?
Yeah, it's funny. In some ways it does feel really full circle, especially in the sense that like, you know, personally, I think I'm taking myself more seriously as an athlete than I ever have before, which feels like in some ways, you know, there's a lot of imposter syndrome around that. And, you know, there's always a voice in my head where it's like, you know, how dare you take yourself so seriously as an athlete when you're not a pro, or this isn't how you make a living, or XYZ thing. But, you know, like I feel like I have athletic goals that I am prioritizing in a way that I haven't since I was, you know, in college or high school. And that feels so good. So like, I think in that sense, like I'm I'm loving that. And then I think that really trickles down into the work that I do too, because, I want everyone to feel like they can have an opportunity to be an athlete and to like experience the good that sport can bring them. And I think, from like the personal work that I do with individuals, like I work with a lot of people who have like never run or like never had an athletic movement practice to now they are running for an hour. I have a client who just ran her first 5K, and I put on this event called the Marin Mile where, it's just a 1 mile race. And she ran the 1 mile race, and it was the first time that she had ever like come to the start line and was a part of a race and like felt the energy of race day and heard the gun go off and got to go to the lineup. And then she was like so juiced on that, and now she's like out here running 5Ks, and maybe she'll run a half marathon or whatever, like, or maybe she won't, and maybe she'll just like have a movement practice that like gets her outside twice a week. But like, to me, that just feels like everything. And I just genuinely like love moving and love sport and love the endorphins and the community and all these things that have come out of it for me, that I just want other people to be able to experience that. It's really helpful when you have someone to just like guide you a little bit. And if I can just be that guide for people, like that is so exciting. And just to be able to, yeah, like use the experiences that I have to help other folks and bring them into the space is just like, it makes me feel so good. And on the kind of like more consulting side of things, it's just like, how can we make sure that the messaging that we're communicating about sports, whether it's from a sports brand or an organization or a nonprofit, is genuinely inclusive, that like all folks feel like they can thrive in that space, they can be safe in that space, they are represented in that space. And I think, brands in some ways are doing a better job than they did years ago. And in some ways they need help still. And I think if all the people who love sport can like give back to it and say like, let's make this better. Let's make it better for all the teens or kids or people who don't feel like they have a space here, and just like, yeah, contribute in that way. I think sport would just be such a better place with like less shit, less trauma, less injuries.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody on this call has been through a lot of stuff that sport contributed to, and it doesn't have to be that way. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like the ethos around that whole project.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Beautiful.
What types
Beautiful.
of clients meet up with you, Shay? Because it sounds like you have an array of different types of clients. Like you have people who, like you said, who's never ran a marathon, to people who are pretty athletic. Do you work with athletes in general, or is it just like an array of everyday, forever athletes,
Yeah, it's kind of a mix. I mean, right now I would say the majority of the people I work with are, I guess, like new to having a movement practice. I have a couple folks who are more experienced athletes who are a little bit older and are trying to figure out like how to have a different relationship with movement and sport than they maybe had 10 or 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I would love to also work with more kind of like developed competitive athletes too, maybe even less on the like actual physical training side and more on the like personal development,
Mm-hmm.
branding development. Like
Mm-hmm.
I in a past life worked as a talent manager with athletes and artists,
Wow.
and a lot of that was like, building a brand and learning how to talk to other brands and doing sponsorships and stuff like that. So that is definitely a goal, is to just like work with more athletes who are looking to, find organizations that they actually feel aligned with and they want to work with. And, if I can help connect those dots, like that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, also your work with
Especially-
identity too. Like you have another caveat with all those things. So yeah, that's pretty remarkable.
And in the day and age of NIL, name, image, and likeness, people need you. These young folks in particular need caring, loving people who it's going to make it about them, like truly about them. It's hard enough for young folks to navigate social media and all the expectations in society and all the pressures. And on top of that, now we're talking about like name, image, and likeness, particularly, I think, for our communities, like communities of color and communities that don't necessarily get the name brand, so to speak. So more than ever, you're going to be so absolutely needed in this world.
Very vital.
Which leads me to ask, like, if people need you, Shai, how can they reach you?
Yeah, please, anybody reach out if you want to talk about anything, movement, sport, fitness, whatever. My website is just physically-educated.com. My email is linked there as well. And yeah, I think the NIL landscape is changing so much. Laura and I have talked about this. It's just like it's a really confusing, complicated time. And when I was at Cal getting my master's, I worked as a tutor with the men's basketball team, and watching those guys trying to navigate this in real time, like it is no joke how complicated this is. And there is a total just like it's a mishigas to get, throw some Yiddish in there of just like information and, a lack of just understanding of like what's allowed, what's not allowed, how to balance everything. And I think the lines between professionalism and amateurism are really blurry in college sports right now. And we are just putting a lot, to your point, on athletes' plates, to be a student, to be an athlete, to be a marketer, to be also just like an 18-year-old or 19-year-old, which is already hard enough. So yeah, I think, there's folks who definitely know more than I do about NIL, but I did have the opportunity to study what was happening in name, image, likeness space when I was at Cal. And it was a really interesting time. That the program that I was a part of was called the Cultural Study of Sport and Education at UC Berkeley, and worked under Derek Van Reenen, who's an amazing scholar of sport. And if anybody's ever interested in kind of studying sport more deeply and studying the kind of like big institutions that govern sport and how sport operates globally, but also nationally and in the college level, it's an awesome program. Would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to tap into you, Shai, because I have athletes that are gearing up for college right now, and they're like sophomores already trying to build a brand, right? And have their social media page be presented where they can be recruited and tagging people. And there's just so much there that I'm like, oh my gosh. And they're 15, 16, it's like even younger. And it's like, as a coach, working with the parent, working with the athlete, how do we all kind of support this and navigate through this? And ultimately, I want every of my athletes to get what they want, but it's just like having to learn that. And I like coached 20 years ago. So there's like this 20-year gap where I didn't have to do this with my athletes, that the social media platform there was none of that. It was like your performance was based on whether or not you got recruited or not. Coaches came to your private clubs, or actually to your competitions, not necessarily your private clubs. They weren't always allowed to do that. So recruitment looked very, very different 20 years ago. It is a whole new gap. Like, it is insane on just the amount of things and how to navigate that and how to figure it out. Like you said, there's so many rules and policies, what you can't do, can't really like go and, you can tag somebody, but you can't like necessarily DM them. It's just a whole new way of recruitment. And I'm going to have to tap your resources because I'm still navigating through it. And it's very confusing and can't even imagine for an athlete who is 16 trying to do that. So there's a lot there.
Absolutely. For sure. Anytime.
All right.
Well, dear Shai, thank you so much for being with us today. We absolutely are just dumbfounded. I'm so impressed and so inspired by you. It's just been such a joy to get to know you and an honor to be in community with you.
Well, thank you guys. I feel the same way about both of you. And yeah, just not something I was expecting this year, but two wonderful people entering my life who I think the work that you're doing and the stories that you're telling are so important. And it's so clear that both of you love sport a lot and also like want to do the work to like make this better. And part of that is like really doing the storytelling. And I think you both are really gifted storytellers. So I appreciate just the same.
Thank you, Shai. That's very sweet. Well, it's amazing to be in community with someone like you too. So working this whole new idea of what sport means and conquering like something that was built on a regimen that probably didn't work and being in community and making something new is just, it's always encouraging to meet people like you. So thank you for being on our show. But before we go, we always end our show with a lightning discuss. And so it's one question, no wrong answers. Would you like to play lightning discuss with us?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the topic today is your recovery practice. Your go-to
Really
recovery practice.
Really good question. And it's something I feel like I'm learning and iterating in real time. I think sleep is the biggest one for me right now. Like, I've dealt with a lot of head injuries, concussions. That was like, a cloud that kind of covered my athletic experience for many years. And sleep and like the importance of getting good sleep and consistent sleep is definitely something that feels like really always at the top of mind. And if I could tell my 18-year-old self to, go to sleep earlier and stop drinking a cold brew at 11 p.m., I would definitely tell her that. Yeah, I mean, recovery is like
so good.
It's everything. It's like the recovery is what makes us able to show up the next day and train hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, sleep a lot, eat a lot, hydrate a lot, all those things. I wish I did all those things more when I was a college athlete. But you know what? Now as a post-college athlete, I can do that. So
Yeah.
how about you guys?
Forever athlete.
Yeah, Laura, what about you?
I'm terrible with my recovery practice whatsoever, and I'm very, very vocal about that. My version of recovery actually is probably more of self-care, which is just being wherever I need to be. So I have a tendency, to work, and then I will absolutely fall over and then sleep for like 24 hours. And my amazing family knows that when I'm in that space, they just turn the shades down and shut the door. I don't have to worry about training for anything or competition. So my hustle is work. So, but I need to do better. I know I need to work on it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
How
I
about
mean,
you,
I
Troy?
think this is a theme too, where I think just high performance athletes, we like the idea of being productive has a lot to do with our identity. So that's where I fall short too. And I can probably do better at recovery. But there was a couple things that I recognize what gives me peace. Was something that I'm trying to practice more so. And Laura, this came from your Beyond the Game workshop, was that one thing that's really important to me is coffee time with my husband. It's like the morning, we don't do anything but coffee and we connect. And to me, like that starts my day off right. And so when that gets skipped, like today, I skipped that because we had a busy morning. I can tell in my body, in my anxiety, that I started it differently. And so that really brings me centered, is that coffee time with him. And it's usually just a quick check-in, like about 15 minutes. And it's just like, how are you feeling today? What are you anxious about? And it sets my day off right. So I noticed that I need that to feel centered. The other thing that I actually recognize with recovery for me is that I need to have play. So if I do not have play in my life and I'm not enjoying something, then the productivity, the anxiousness, all that stuff gets overwhelming and it puts me in a different track. So those two things I've noticed is like coffee time with my husband, which is partially play too, because we get silly with each other, but play is really important for me to feel rested. And I didn't know that until recently. So I would say those are the two things that I could do. So
I love
that's
that.
it. Thank you.
That's amazing.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Well,
All right,
thank you so
lovies.
much, Shay.
Been amazing.
Yeah. And we hope you have a lovely week. And we're going to have you back because you're amazing. And I'm sure we only scratched the surface with what's to be said. So looking forward to the next time that we meet.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Shay.
You're welcome. All
Bye.
right, bye. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, please reach out to us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
Share and follow us on Amazon, Spotify, and Apple. Help us out and leave a 5-star review. Thanks.